I really believe that this first thing we're going to talk about, it's very, 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 very meaningful and important. And I don't think that you had a realization of this until I open this in your lives and show it to you. I think that you had an intuition that this is happening, what I'm going to show you, but I don't think that you had the vision of how much it's happening. So, Andriuja, that's a topic that we started talking last week, but we didn't finish. So I opened this presentation discussing a little bit more of some extra thinking about masking, because I want to get here and I will explain you this demo, and and I promise you it's going to be really cool and really mind-blowing. So obviously we hear a combination of sounds and the characteristics, of course, in interacting with the environment, and our brains are decoding this. The auditory masking happens when there are two sounds happening at the same time, and occurs in the frequency domain. This is really cool and really important. Like, guys, look, again, there is fear in me of boring you. There is fear in me of making you feel that you're wasting your resources or your money to have a meeting with me, because I really take my work very seriously. But I want to tell you that in the last 2 months, my vision of sound changed drastically. I hope that this is happening to you too. Maybe it didn't happen, but my vision of sound changed ridiculously, brutally in the last 2 months. And it's because of these lectures. I feel that people who study sound, because music is such a tusa, kind of. It's like we spend little time seeing this as a science and seeing this as a formalized body of work and knowledge, and we ignore some technical details that I think are really important. And I think that the main thing that I have ignored, I told you this, is that I am a body that is mixing, and that's not the same as the equipment. And I know I had this moment when I was like freaking out, and you guys were like, we're not so excited about this, and I was like, fuck guys, like this thing. And I'm still in shock about this. So this means that I am either stupid or I am seeing something that you guys are not seeing, or that you knew this a long time before than me, and well, great. I mean, if that's the case. I'm saying this as a preamble because, again, I'm really nervous about all of these lectures because I take my work seriously. Imagine that you are me and you guys connect to the internet every Thursday to come to talk to me, and you just want this thing to be exciting. And so I'm kind of like trying to hype it up a little bit because I really believe that what we're discussing is really cool. But anyways, back to it. And you see,
Leo, you know what? Why we may not be so excited about some things that you will. Because like that's, I think it's kind of simple because you have like a lot of experience, and for example, something that you find exciting, yeah. We just don't understand how it's practically applicable.
Yes. And I can tell you, wait, let me, I fixed something in the sound there, as you can notice. Can you say check 1 second?
Check one.
Yeah, it's going to the recording. You know, the implication of what I'm telling you, the main implication of what's happening to you is that my main meter became a VU meter. And as you know, this radically contradicts how I mixed all the time. And this happened like 2 weeks ago. It's like my main meter became a VU meter. I almost don't care anymore about DVFX and DVFS, sorry, and peaks, and that's a really important change, because I realized that whatever the equipment feels is sort of secondary to whatever the human feels, because our hearing system is really different than the system of the computer. That's what I felt that day, and I was like, oh, I get it. Like, and so the only practical implication of what I'm telling you is that because I was having a problem that was recurring, and tell me if this happens to you, this little pisoc when you're mixing, that is some saturation. It's like some pisoc that appears when things are loud. It sounds kind of like this, like
that people like it in vocals, for example.
And I was like, why that is happening? And nowadays I still don't know if that pisoc is happening in our ears or in the system at this moment in time. But all I know is that you can be sure that you will find it whenever the VU meter is clipping. Because the main point that I'm trying to tell is like I was mixing a lot all my life and I was getting saturation when the meters were still telling me that everything was fine, and I was not getting this. I don't know if this happens to you. Maybe it doesn't happen to you. I don't know, but it was happening to me a lot. And anyways, and I think that what we're going to discuss today is really connected to this. So check this out. Auditory masking can happen in the frequency domain. I mean, that masking happens when two things of the same frequency arrive to your ears, and masking happens when two things arrive at the same time. They don't have to be necessarily at the same frequency. Oh, and that sounds like a little sentence, but it's a huge sentence because it means, obviously, it means pretty obvious. It means that low-end things can mask high-end things too. Like it happens when you are in the Zawod and you hear a machine that has a low-end rumble, and then you hear me trying to talk to you. And you see, because we don't think scientifically about these things, we think that this is happening just because one of them is louder than the other, kind of thing. But and that's the simplistic and I don't know, like non-professional way of seeing it. But what's happening is that because two things are arriving at the same time, our system makes a priority and listens to something before the other, and that's why we hear something quieter or louder than any other thing. I mean, it's very simple, subtle change in your way of thinking. What I'm trying to say is like things disappear from your auditory field, not because they are not there anymore. It's because your brain sort of like it's more sensitive to one of them than the others. That's the Fletcher and Monson curves. That's the but that's the masking curves that I'm going to show you right now. And this is really important thing, the masking curves. But I don't know what changed inside of me was just to get even more far away from the machines and more focused on the body of the human being. You know, that's kind of what's going on in my head, and the change that I'm going through, and the practical implication of that. And I can show you this next week when we meet. I think that I will do it so it's all more clear. I think that next week will be cool to have a bit of a mixing session and prepare your questions. Okay, let's keep it like that. Next week's session, I'm going to be mixing. If you want to do this in DTH, we can do it in DTH. If you want to do this online, we can do it online. I will be mixing and discussing like the implications of these things that I've been telling you lately on my new style of mixing. And by the way, I do have a new style of mixing that changed in the last month. I have a new mix boss, absolutely new mix boss, and a couple of other things changed because of what I'm telling you. So, okay. Auditory masking can occur in the frequency domain and on the time domain. Let me read this 1 second. Mask threshold is the quietest level of a signal perceived with a combined when combined with a specific masking sound. So obviously masking has a threshold, right? I mean, there is a point where things start getting masked. That's what it means. And the amount of masking is the difference between the masked and unmasked thresholds. So I mean, there is an amount of masking and theoretically you can measure it. Basic auditory masking tests involve measuring unmasked thresholds, introducing masking noise at a fixed sound pressure level, blah, blah, blah. This is kind of like more technical stuff. Now, this I really care. And Andrei, sorry for the paftareña, but I really want Dima to get this because this is really beautiful stuff. What do you have here, Bratan? It's a slide that is showing you how much there is a relationship, and not a slide, but better said, a graph that is showing you how much there is a relationship in between 410 hertz. This line is 410 hertz. Imagine this is 410 hertz, and let's say that you play this at 80 decibels, 410 hertz. And so that means that 1 kilohertz gets reduced approximately 40 when you do that. You see? So this thing is quantifying for you the relationship between 410 and anything. Like, I mean, you see, there is, and we all knew, I don't know about you, I mean, of course, we all had an idea, like, it's like, if I am this award and I hear a machine that is very loud, and Leo speaks to me at the same time, I don't speak Leo. But I don't know, tell me, be honest, were you thinking that this is because of masking, or were you thinking because, just Leo is quieter than the machine?
I think it's a combination, like, mostly by the mostly by the loudness, but there is a part of masking.
It's because of masking. Like, it's really because of masking. Like, a more sensitive system will be able to persist them both. That's what I mean that it changed inside of me. It is because of masking. Like the reason why you hear me quieter is because your ear cells get desensitized because something else is going on. It's not because they have different energy. Like the whole thing is traveling anyways. You see what I mean? It's like imagine if I send a radio signal and a light signal, you will see only the radio signal, but the radio signal is still arriving to you. You're just not feeling it. That's what it changed inside of me. It's like, fuck, like I see, I was kind of like imagining that more of these relationships in between waveforms were happening before it was arriving to me. And thus, I was thinking that this thing was happening inside the equipment or inside the source. And I think that perhaps the reason why I'm more shocked than you, maybe this is something that you guys had already realized, you know, because I consider you super smart. So
I just thinking, sorry, about the. Do you know that when you continuously hear some noise, and after some time you will not hear this noise, like your brain
crazy,
masking,
but the noise is still arriving to you. Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, and I just thinking that your brain like cuts the frequencies of the noise just to not overload your how it's called, your brain.
Yeah.
But will it cut the sounds that not a noise, but with the same frequency? For example, the frequencies from your voice, or it just will mask only the noise?
Can you reformulate the question? Like, just give it one more spin. I'm sure you will be able to articulate it better.
For example, the noise is the notch of 80 decibels. This brain function of cutting the noise, will it cut 80 decibels from another source of sound, like your voice?
Yeah, exactly. You got it. Yeah. I get your point right now. Yes. And actually, you will see in the next slide, and Andre didn't see the next slide because we had to stop. There will be something really important about in the next two slides about this. You will see it. But there is something really interesting about this that I notice here. Notice the difference, the relationship, for example, between 410 hertz and 1 kilohertz is stronger than the relationship between 410 hertz and 300, for example. Look, 300 kind of falls here. Let me just try to see it. Well, maybe not stronger, but it's comparable. Like, I mean, the difference, the relationship between 410 and 200, it's weaker than the difference between 410 and 1000. That's, for me, is really shocking. But let me be sure of what I'm telling you. Better said, it's weaker than the relationship in between 3000 and 200. You see what I mean? Like the interaction between 400 and 200 is weaker than the interaction between 400 and 3000. That's brutally mind-blowing. I believe that if I were to remake all the MMS course, this should be the first slide of the whole thing. It's kind of like, hey, welcome to MMS. There is a stronger relationship between 400 hertz and 3K than 400 hertz and 200 hertz. Goodbye. No, I really mean it because it explains so much. It explains why the low end eats everything, and you will see it more clearly in the next slides. I'm gonna read this to make sure that I don't lose this material. This is all coming from what's the name? From a blog post that I found that it's actually made by a speaker manufacturer. That's where I found it. So masking curves are a way to visualize how masking sound affects our perception of another sound. In audio engineering, masking curves are used to understand how different frequencies of sound can be masked or hidden by other sounds in the same frequency range. Masking curves are typically plotted in a graph with the frequency x-axis and sound pressure level on the y. The curves show the threshold of audibility for a test tone in the presence of masking sounds at a different frequencies and SPL. The threshold of audibility in the middle FPL required for a tone to be heard in the presence of a masking sound. So let's put it again like that. Actually, you see, I'm very happy that I read this because I think I was framing this explanation a little bit wrong. If I play, this is a better way to put it. if I play simultaneously, and actually, bro, like, to be honest and super honest with you, I just had the explanation wrong, to be honest with you, because this is also a new context for me. This curve, I have not seen it until last week. I think the best way to interpret this relationship is like this. If I want to play at the same time 410 hertz and 3K, for example, let's see it from the perspective of 1 kilohertz. I will need to play the 1 kilohertz, I need to play it at 40 dB. You see? It's kind of not telling you what I initially told you. I was wrong. I'm gonna be honest. I was wrong. It's not like 410 dBs are masking 1 kilohertz by 40 dBs. It's similar to what I explained. It's not so far away to what I had understood, but it's more sophisticated to see it like this. If you play two frequencies at the same time, 400 hertz and 1 kilohertz, the 400 hertz is at 80 decibels. So you hear the 1 kilohertz one, it needs to be at around 40. If it's under 40, it will disappear from your spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's I think a more appropriate way of saying. So let's say now from the point of view of 400 hertz and 200 hertz, for example. If you play 400 hertz at 80 decibels and you play 200 hertz at 10 decibels, you will hear the 200 hertz anyways. That's what I'm understanding there. Sorry, just a second. I have a phone call here. Hello? Tavares. Yes, I do. I'm now in a lecture, bro. I'll call you like in 40 minutes. Should be in a, but it can be negotiable if it's urgent. Let me call you in 40 minutes, okay? I'm in a lecture right now. I promise you I call you and we will sort out in 40 minutes. Da way, пока, bratán. So, okay, great. I'm gonna reread this. I want to be sure of what I said. Masking curves are typically plotted on a graph with frequency on the x-axis and sound pressure level on the y-axis. The curves show the threshold of audibility for a test tone in the presence of a masking sound. You get it now? You feel it?
Mm-hmm.
At different frequencies and SPLs. The threshold of audibility is the minimum field required for a tone to be heard in the presence of a masking sound. So, in the presence of 420 and 410 hertz at 80 decibels, the threshold of audibility for 1 kilohertz is 40 dB. So that means that what I said before, it's partly right and partly wrong. The relationship of masking between 80 and 200, between 410 and 200 is not stronger. That's wrong, what I said. Because you see, what this means is like if I play 410 decibels at 80, so 410 hertz at 80 decibels, 200 hertz, I will only need to play it at 10 hertz so it starts becoming audible. Actually, so I had a mistake. This thing really shocks me here. Like this relationship between, for example, 400 and 1000. I was not expecting that to be so close. I thought that masking was way much more localized. I didn't imagine that masking was spreading out so much in the whole spectrum. I mean, I was imagining it. But you see, the way I was perceiving, and this I found a good way to articulate why I'm freaking out. The way I was perceiving this is like waveforms were competing to arrive to me. You see?
Mm-hmm.
And now I see it. No. Everything arrives to me. It's just like I delete some shit out of there. Something kind of like that. I was imagining a competition of energy, sort of like trying to reach me or to reach the observer or to reach anywhere. But now I see like, no, all the radiation, it's kind of like light. You see, like there is all this universe happening around us and we miss the ultraviolet, we miss it, but this is arriving to us anyways. And if you were a camera or a mosquito or a bee or whatever, like the world is totally different than the world that we experience, and the same is happening with sound. I was missing that point a little bit, even though I so deeply think about this, but I was just not seeing it. The masking of a particular test tone shows the SPL of masking sound required to raise the threshold of audibility for a tone. The curve is higher at frequencies where the masking of sound has most energy and is therefore more effective at masking the test tone. So, what can you get from searching masking curves? Well, I mean, what are stronger relationships for resonance, for cleaning, for everything. By analyzing masking curves, audio engineers can determine which frequencies are more susceptible to masking and adjust their mixing and mastering accordingly. They can also use masking curves to optimize the placement and EQ of different instruments in a mix to avoid masking and ensure each instrument is heard clearly. Simultaneous masking of frequency. This is the exact same diagram. Simultaneous masking happens when a sound is made inaudible by a noise of the same duration. You see, when I said before this thing, and I think that this is important to clarify as well, when I say like auditory masking happens in the frequency domain and in the time domain, what that means is like sounds of the same duration, sounds of the same, not of the same frequency anymore, sounds that have a frequency relationship that is maskable, if I can call it like that. So simultaneous masking occurs when sounds of the same duration happens, and the effectiveness of the masker in raising the threshold of the original sound depends on the frequency of the sound and the frequency of the masker. Let me see something, by the way. Yeah, okay, I was just checking that I didn't got something wrong here, but everything is okay. Like, of course, when the thing is the same duration and the same frequency, it's just like all of this is super obvious to us. It's kind of like, Leo, big news. You're telling me on year 3 of the course that when something is of the same frequency on the same duration, I will not hear one or the other. What I'm telling you is why. I'm telling you that this happens. It's something that we understand. And before I was thinking that it was in the gear. Anyways, on frequency masking happens when the masker and the original sound are within the same auditory filter, making them indistinguishable. This is the phenomenon with the tone center at 410 Hertz, like I told you. At low masker levels around 20 or 40, the masking patterns have little effect in our listening abilities. There's another thing that happens there, which is that it's amplitude dependent and frequency dependent. The louder the thing becomes, the stronger that interaction becomes. As the masker intensity increase, the masking curves widen, especially for sounds of higher frequency than the masker. Upward spread of the masking is why an interference sound mask higher frequency signals much more than... Wait. Let me just read this a bit more calm. As the masker intensity increases, 50 to 80 decibels, for example, he's jumping like from here to here. The masking curves widen, so they become more large. And especially for sounds at frequency higher than the masker. So let me see. Yeah, you see, like when I'm moving from, this is so cool. This is so cool. Like 410 at 40 decibels has no relationship with 1K at all. But 410 at 80 decibels has a lot of relationship with 1K. So it's really amplitude dependent. Upward spread of masking is why an interference sound masks higher frequency signals much more than lower ones. Upward spreading of masking is why the interference sound masks higher frequency signals more than others. So now check the next slide. This is really PPS. The lower the sound, the more it masks the high frequencies. It's super counterintuitive, in my opinion. If we repeat the experiment using 150 Hz masking tone, the result is wider upward spreads towards higher frequencies. So the auditory masking phenomena becomes stronger and extends further across the audio spectrum. So the lower the signal, and that makes a lot of sense of what we perceive in the universe. You know, like if you are in an industrial zone and there's a very low end thing, it just kind of like masks everything. And if you think about how the ear is designed and how the ear works, it sort of makes sense empirically. And I imagine also that the waveforms are so long and so energetic that they just like eat all our auditory capacity. But anyways, that's a really cool thing, reality or fact on why the low end masks everything. And also why it's so hard and so damaging for your mix when you have a bad low end. You know, so you can now feel how much the low end spreads out its tentacles to the high end, and that's kind of what I wanted to explore in this slide. So okay, I'm gonna, considering that you guys are third-year students and you are way more advanced, I'm gonna move on quickly and see what I can extract from this and the next slide that I have, next set of slides that I have that could be of use to you. in your life as third-year students. Further thoughts on masking. Auditory masking affects our perception of sound in loudspeaker and woofer setups. So, I mean, basically what it's telling us is like your woofer, your subwoofer is kind of like participating a lot in the obscuring of other frequencies. If reproduction levels are say too high in the low mid frequencies, the masking will occur and compromise our hearing abilities in the spectrum above the masking tones. Pretty obvious. And imagine, I mean, look at the deep implications of what I'm trying to tell you. Imagine that you're setting up a system, like a speaker system, and you make your subwoofers overly loud, and you observe that in your pult everything is fine. But because the low end is louder and everything else, your perception of everything is going to change completely. And it projects so much to the high end in a way that I was never imagining before until I seen this. Especially this light. This light really shocked me very much. Because, and actually, this is interesting. Like, this is interesting, by the way. I'm noticing something here that in a point this relationship becomes negative. I don't even know how I can interpret that right now. I mean, I would need to think about it for a while, but in a point that relationship becomes negative, it means that I will need to play this quieter so I can hear it. I really don't understand that, but that's
no, that means that the sound, for example, the sound of 3K just alone will be quieter than the sound of 3000 with the sound of 150
yeah, 150
on
yeah
10 decibels, I think, like something like this.
Yeah, it's a good way to see it. So if reproduction levels are set too high in the low mid frequencies, auditory masking will occur and compromise our hearing abilities in the spectrum of the masking tones. Excessive low frequency levels can make the low mid spectrum appear muddy, undefined, lacking clarity in dynamic, and compromise the balance in the audio mix. You see, one of the implications of what we're discussing right now is like, I remember Bobcat saying if your mid-range is wrong, it means that everything is wrong. And sometimes when we're trying to fix something in the mid-range, for example, maybe the solution is in the low end. And this is really important. I don't know how to train us to EQ like that, but yeah. Reducing excessive bass levels can restore sound definition and clarity in the mid-low spectrum. That's exactly what I just said, coincidentally.
You know, it links with the practice of better to cut than to add.
Yeah.
That, for example, you cutting the low end and your mid-range becomes better.
Yep.
Just because of this.
And I don't know, I think like my fantasy or dream is that you guys are mixing in the future and you're just like, oh, let me try it. And then you get to that point. It's like, fuck, yeah, I just cut the low end and the mid-range became clear. Like, this is like literally paying for having a discussion with an expert. Like, or I don't have to call me an expert, but I mean, somebody with more experience. That's it. That's how I see it. Okay, adjusting the balance of the audio mix using onboard EQ in loudspeakers and subwoofers can help reduce excessive levels. What it means is that calibrating your speakers is also super important in this context, because again, like what the DAW is telling you is not what's going on. That's sort of my rage of this year. Okay, let's see what I got here that could be of use. This is gonna talk about this is to be honest with you, this is a presentation I prepared for another course. That's why there is some repetitive things for you here, but I do remember that there are some really important things in this slide and in the next set of slides that I really want to give you. And one of those things is some exercises in the technical ear trainer that I want to share with you. So let me see, that thing is here, right? Wait, let me just be sure that I got it here. No, frequency-selective dynamics. I see. Wait. Just a second. Yeah, I think that there is even a more useful. Let me just move this here. Just a moment. There is in Rasvitia. I wish so much we would have done these lectures together, man. Like, I mean, not now in the second year, because this course was a very great success, in my estimation. I hope that the guys think the same, but it seems like that because people were coming to the lectures. It's been like 25 lectures, and they were really good. Like we had a really good time because it was it was delivered in the right timing. Like for you guys, this would be boring because you already know this, but it was a really good timing for them. Let me just put this here in post-production. Yeah. And I'm gonna put a little strelочка there. Wait, post-production. Yeah, okay. Just a moment. There is something from that set of slides that I also want to share with you, and I just want to have it there. Let me put this as well in this lecture 27 here. So let me just call this post. Lecture 27. Like I mean, as part of this lecture, dynamic range control. I'll open it a bit later. Let's continue. So, I mean, one way of targeting specific frequency regions with dynamic processors is to use parallel processing and to EQ differently the parallel track. That's a little trick there that I don't think is a bad one. What it means is like doing. Okay, let's see this from another point of view. Before we go and discuss multiband anything, let's talk about some little mileage things that can be done with full range, full band compression. So one of the things you can do, and I really recommend you to try this if you haven't, is like when you do parallel compression, EQ the parallel compressor very differently, the parallel track very differently than your main track. It's an option that you have in your sleeve, in your arsenal. You see, one way to target specific frequency regions with dynamic processors is to use parallel processing and to EQ differently the parallel track. In parallel track processing, the dynamic processor is set up as a send effect, and the return channel is EQ'd to tailor the process tone. I'm trying to get there, like things that I think are important that could help you, that are new for you, that maybe you don't know before. The same happens. I mean, basically what this part of the slides mean is like, hey, use your parallel track in a bit of an extreme way. Don't be so respectful when you make your parallel track. Another application is to use compression, EQ, and gating to achieve frequency-selective transient enhancement. What it means is that if you don't want to use a multiband compressor, you can EQ your parallel compression so you have more control if that's what you want. That's kind of all that he's trying to say there. This can create phase issues, so one has to be careful with this. Also the important, well, I mean, and of course the position before or after equalizer or compressor is important, and in general it's better to put filter before dynamics if you want to enter high frequency sustain. That's nothing new for us, we have discussed it a lot. So then this was like before you open, wait, did I make a mistake here? Yeah. This was kind of like before you open your, yeah, I get it. Before you open your multiband compressor. In the dynamic session of this course, we demonstrated various ways to handle the time domain balance problems. In the EQ section of this course, we discussed frequency domain issues. We did this already in the past. Some balance problems cannot be fixed unless you process both frequency and time at the same time, referring to multiband compressors. Frequently selected dynamics can be a powerful tool that can be used to tackle tough balancing tasks. So what is the meaning of all of this where we have arrived in this lecture? Remember, the part of masking was an extra thing that I told you, so you can stop thinking about that for a moment and understand that I'm not connecting these two topics. The second thing that I wanted to say when I build the slides, in order to continue the flow of the book of Mike Sr., is that multiband compressors appear in the moment when you decided that you cannot anymore work with a full range compression. And I don't think that people use multiband compression like that. I think that people go for a multiband compressor way faster than what they need to go. I really think that a multiband compressor is like a CPR or something, like when you put electricity to save somebody's heart or something like that. It is really a last resource. How are you guys engaging with this? Do you use multiband compressors a lot?
Not really. I just use OTT like for coloring mostly.
What is OTT? It's a compressor in particular.
It's a multiband compressor, yeah, from Ableton.
Ah, I see.
It's very rude multiband compressor.
Yeah, it's very popular between among EDM producers because it's
Yeah.
easy to use and it's free and etc.
I see.
Yeah, I use it just for coloring.
Got it.
That's it.
Okay, so wait, let me go back here. Okay, so you see, I mean, he's kind of telling something that is not so relevant to you guys. Dima, you were selling the same, that you don't use it so much, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Frequently selected dynamics professors should be used with care as they can easily ruin a mix. And I'm telling you, like, I don't know if I mentioned this to you. A couple of weeks ago, there was like an open lecture in MMS. And it was an open lecture for the people who want to do a mixing and mastering course that was going to happen with me. But it didn't happen because MMS couldn't collect enough students for it. So the course was not open. And I gave him this task. As soon as the open lecture started, I gave them all an acoustic guitar. And I was like, go and mix it. And the acoustic guitar had 4 microphones. And I went walking around the room and seeing what everybody was doing. And I saw people going straight into multiband compressors, many of them. Like going straight into multiband compressors and trying to get like some special plugins. Even somebody was trying to install something like, I cannot mix my acoustic guitar without this. Yeah. And when everybody finished, I was like, okay, who checked the face? And nobody did. Nobody. And I was like, end of the lecture, you need a mixing course. But anyways, just something that I see very recurrently. Let me see, C-Levance reduction. I mean, this thing talks about de-essers, right? Like, I mean, dedicated de-essers. Like, I mean, it's a really, of course, I'm not going to talk about de-essers with you. I mean, I think that you guys already know. Also remember, guys, like, one of the reasons why you also pay me money to do something, one of the reasons why, the way I see it is that you have a summary of a book. It will take you weeks to read that shit, but you open this and you have the summary of the whole book in 100 slides or something. So I mean, I don't know, it's cool. I really recommend you to sometimes jump in here and see what I have saved here for you, because I imagine that you're gonna forget something and later you can remember. So de-essers, I'm not gonna talk about it because you talk about it a lot. I asked like some friends and some colleagues, also Alexander Perfile, when I had a conversation. I was trying to put you here other use cases apart from vocals. So strings, it's an option. Like de-essers can be used to reduce syllables in string instruments such as violins and violas. Like really, I use this a lot on trumpets and horns. And anything that is brasses, de-essers can be really good at reducing syllables in brass instruments such as trumpets and trombones. I told you this a lot, that de-essers are super useful on hi-hats, overheads. If you haven't never done this before, do it. Nowadays, my favorite way to fix hi-hats and overheads, you know it, it's with fucking expanders. And if you have any questions about it, let me know and I'll repeat you this. This really helped me a lot. The whole expander thing on overheads is crazy. Electric guitars, this can also be used to reduce syllables in electric guitars, make it sound more smooth and polished, and reduce fret noises on acoustic guitars. This is really cool application of a de-esser. So consider this, I mean, in case you want to use it. De-esser obviously is a, I mean, remember, we are in a lecture that is called Frequency-Selective Dynamics. So dynamics that happen only in a certain place. That's why a de-esser and a multiband compressor, they're kind of the same. A de-esser is just like a very stupid multiband compressor that only works in a certain band range, but it's literally a multiband compressor. So wideband de-essing versus linear phase split band de-essing. God damn it, I'm sure that you have seen this and I'm sure that you don't know the answer. Maybe you do. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you know why?
No.
You see, I can always, even though we have been together, I'm speaking like a babushka supposedly. Even though we have been together for so many years,
I always did it by ear. Like what works better.
Surprise you a little bit. You gotta really give me a fucking award, because I won the award of who can speak more for 3 years. Like, I'm the winner of this. Like, of course. Of course. You know, I used to have a blog called Leo Habla Mucho. It was my blog in Venezuela when I was living there.
Leo много разговаривает.
Leo много разговаривает. I used to have this blog, so...
It's like It's the first like 10 words that I teach. How to say this? That I studied when I started studying
habla
Spanish.
mucho.
Hablo mucho.
Habla mucho. So, okay, let's go to this wideband de-essing versus linear phase de-essing. Andrei, do you know what we're talking about here?
Nope.
It depends on which de-esser you're using. If you use for example, what's the name?
I just use the stock Ableton.
If you ever encounter this in the future, you will know what it is. If you use the
Fab filter,
Fab filter DS Pro DS, in there is a function here, like here, single vocal and all around, wideband and split band. It's a typical thing that you see in the Sers a lot. And so let's go and explain the difference. And you see, guys, like this is what I wanted to achieve with you in general. It's like, you see, I came to this level where I am without knowing this, because people in sound engineering, they don't focus on this little mileage sometimes. And I just tried it and it works. And I'm so happy that I'm given the opportunity to study this for me. And then I express this, spread it out to other people. Like, I'm so happy about this. So, wideband de-essing versus linear phase split band de-essing. Wideband de-essing process the entire audio signal at once. It's the simplest and most common type of de-essing. It's effective at reducing signals, but it can also introduce some harshness and distortion to the sound. And by the way, I get this problem with Aliona Sherbina a lot when I mix her, and I realized that it was the fucking wide band de-essing. That I was getting conflicts, and Aliona's vocals were sounding like as if I was running it through a distortion. And then I swap, after I read this, I was mixing my holiday, and I was like, oh fuck, let me swap that to linear phase. Oh great, it works better. Linear phase de-essing processes the audio signal in two bands. The high frequency band that contains the syllables and the low frequency band that does not. So there is a band split, and then the dynamic range reduction doesn't happen to one of the bands. This allows the de-esser to reduce the syllables without affecting the sound of the rest of the signals. However, maybe it's harder to get a good result with the split band. So basically the difference is that one of them treats the whole audio signal and the other one makes a band split, and it just like ignores everything that is outside of the de-esser as such. Which type will you use depends on your needs and preference. If you're looking for simple and effective way of reducing syllables, wideband is a good option. Here are some things to consider.
Leo, sorry, the question, but why you can still choose band in Fab filter when you use wideband?
So when you use wideband, you can still choose band. You mean here?
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, what's happening is that there is a bypass, like a filter that is, you kind of like, you have to see it like that. In one of them, you make a copy of the signal and reduce everything that is outside of your, and you send that to a compressor. And in the other one, you send that all to a multi-band compressor.
Okay.
Yeah. You see? That's the difference. Yeah. So one of them would be more precise, but the other one will be more musical, kind of. Oh shit, I don't want to open Pro Tools. Sorry, I just want to go back here. Okay, the type of audio signal you're working with. I mean, why should you choose one or the other? This was the question I was trying to answer. Well, it depends on the type of signal you're working with. Wideband is generally a good choice for vocals and other solo instruments. Linear phase is a good choice for full mixes or a drum kit in total. You know, so it can help prevent the de-esser from affecting the sound of the rest of the instruments. Of course, your personal preference. Some people prefer the sound of wideband, some people prefer the other. Experiment with both, and that's it. I was in this point of the preparation for this presentation. I was working with GPT, and I was asking a question to GPT like, give me two cases when it's better to use wideband instead of linear phase, and just gave me an example. Like, here are two cases where it's preferable to use wideband de-essing over linear phase split band de-essing. So when you're working with a limited amount of time, so if you're in a hurry, that was the answer he told me. No, but think about it. That can mean, so remember that some people make live sound. They have an iLok, and they have they can load in any console in a live sound. They can load a Pro DS, you know, and just make a live mix with that plugin. And so maybe that's an argument. You don't have time. You're in a hurry. You want to obtain a faster result. When you're working with a vocal track that is already sounding good and you want it to sound better, for example, it's telling you an option in which you wanna use wideband. And when you wanna use split band, if you want to have more control, linear phase allows you to control the frequency range that is being the S better. This can be helpful, etc. When you're working with a full mix as well, so maybe it's better to use like we said it a couple of minutes ago, split band. So there was a conversation about pumping and breathing in the book. In general, pumping and breathing are, like, we know what it is. Well, I mean, let's define it. Pumping happens when the signal responds to a low transient, and breathing occurs when the signal is released after a low frequency transient. So this can be undesirable, and how to fix that? Use low pass. This is just what Mike Senior is telling us. Like, I'm not saying that this is extremely important or something. I'm just telling you, hey, this is what follows in this line of thought of this man. Use a low pass filter in the compressor side chain. Of course, use faster attack time. Like, faster attack time will reduce the amount of the time the compressor has to reduce gain. So it will perhaps produce a situation when you don't have so much pumping and breathing. And the slower release time will be for the breathing case. Okay, there is I have discussed with you in the past the differences between multiband dynamics and dynamic equalizers. I prepare this better. Like, I am ready to ignore this right now, but I prepared it better. Like, I have never prepared it before. Should I skip it? Because we have talked about this a lot.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, great.
We can just read.
Yeah, you can read it yourself, but I recommend you to do it. If you ever want to understand the difference between multiband dynamics and dynamic equalizers, come to this slide, and it's really deeply explained. Before, I had some explanation that I myself built on my own, but here I went and I read a bit on this book and made my own thing. And well, I mean, here are 3 cases when it's better to use a dynamic equalizer over a multiband compressor. So case 1, when you need to control specific frequency range without affecting the range of the signal. This is when it's better to use a dynamic EQ than a multiband. When you want to avoid adding any additional sorting character to the sound. So if you want to make gain reduction of something but you don't want character, dynamic equalizer. That's why we use dynamic equalizers everywhere, and then we use a multiband compressor if something, but I kind of barely use them. When you need to make a precise adjustment or a frequency response of a sound, clear. Now, the opposite, like 3 cases when it's better to have a multiband compressor over a dynamic equalizer. Wait, I think here I have a mistake. Yeah, no, I don't. This is really cool. When you need
you have a mistake in the topic.
Yeah, exactly.
It's same.
I copied the thing. This is like that. Multiband compressor over a dynamic equalizer. Yeah, correct. That's what you meant, bratan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is cool when you need to control the dynamics of a specific frequency range, and here is important when you need to avoid affecting the overall volume of the signal. That's so true, because the compressor has a gain matching function that will turn the gain up, and when you want to add more sonic character to a sound, obviously. Moments when you want to work with a multiband compressor to reduce harshness of the vocals, to add punch. It's so true. This is really true. To add punch to the low end of the mix, to control feedback in a live setting, man. When your multiband compressors are brutally useful in live, it's the most useful when they are, really, to be honest. Because what do you want? To compress the vocals. What do you want? To compress the vocals in a way that it doesn't produce as feedback. How do you achieve that? Well, you can EQ the hell out of your vocals and kill them, which is why I'm a bad live sound engineer, because that's what I end up doing. Or you can just put a multiband compressor and just like make the quieter parts louder in the frequency range that doesn't feedback. You see?
Yeah.
Make sound more consistent to add sonic character to the sound.
I should try this.
Yeah,
next
do
time.
Do it. Other frequency selective dynamic nuggets. In English, I don't know if you know this, but they use the word nuggets like a little piece of information. You can say it like that. Other frequency selective dynamic nuggets. Overall, dynamic noise reduction is a powerful tool that can reduce unwanted background noise in other recordings. So it's more effective in our method of noise reduction. So basically, he's telling you like multiband dynamics are useful noise reducers. This is pretty obvious. I use them a lot for that case too. When I have a hum, like you see, like you can just like use this to relatively to the hum, increase the level of everything and turn down the hum. If the hum is not happening all the time. Like sometimes electric guitars, this is a really good application for a dynamic compressor. And remember this in the future, if this happens to you, it's super typical. It's like you play a chord and you hear like, and then in the sustain of the chord, you start listening to a hum. Like that's a good moment to use a multiband compressor as well. And I mean, here is an explanation more about like how does
and what you should compress in this example.
Sorry?
What part of the sound you should compress when you
compress everything. Let me just put this to thought so I say it correctly. It would be ideal to use to use a dynamic compressor as an expander, which you can do it really easily. For example, with the Pro MB, just like instead of pulling it down, pushing it up, and so it will make the hum quieter. So you can focus it on that if you have it as an expander. And if not, you would do it the opposite way around. You will make a split band and compress and gain match the upper side. So when the hum is happening, you know, the upper side is being pushed up. That's an option that you have.
Okay.
How does dynamic noise reduction work? Dynamic reduction works by analyzing the audio signal and identifying the frequencies that are most likely to contain noise. The noise reduction, it's an algorithm. And that's a magic word that people throw there when they don't want to explain you things. There is an algorithm. And you're like, okay, but what is the algorithm doing? And that's where I can stay at. You know, how does isotope RX works? With Fourier transformations. I mean, and putting things out of phase. That's what I imagine. That's what they call the algorithm. What is something negative of using the noise reduction? Well, it says here it can be more time consuming. I don't agree. It can be really easy, but that's what Mike Senior is telling us. It can reduce artifacts. Yes, I use it very rarely. It can be less effective in reducing noise in recordings with a lot of dynamic range. Agreed. So, okay, guys, look, in our Pavka of stuff that imagine that there's very rare occasions in which we'll come to this Pavka, but if you ever come to this Pavka back, please notice that I added here a presentation that is called Dynamic Range Control from BSc Year 2. I extremely very much encourage you to come and check that presentation out. This is the basics presentation I gave to the second year students about compression in general, but unlike my previous presentations on compression that I have given, including to you, this was the first time that I based it all in literature. It was not like some YouTube videos mixed with some stuff. It was everything based on literature, and it's a really pro presentation of compression. It's like the first time that I'm really happy with what was delivered, and it has zero basic bullshit. It's very, very pro. I think so about this. And it, for example, it goes to big lengths. And I think that next week what I plan to do, I'm going to put this more like in lecture 28. And I think next week what I plan to do is to have a couple of conversations. Well, no, next week I don't know exactly if in next week, but in the next 2 lectures, one of the things I plan to do is to have a bit of a conversations about what's going on here. Because this thing of the crest factor, we have never seen it like that. I don't think that you have heard that word, like the crest factor. And it will make you understand why a compressor makes everything on average louder. It's really a really cool idea, and it's connected to what you're seeing here. It will also make you understand like what happens to a square wave when you compress it, really, like what's really happening to a square wave. And very importantly, it will introduce us to the technical ear trainer. I have already discussed some things of the technical ear trainer too, but I want us to see with you the module of technical ear trainer on dynamic compression. It's extremely difficult, and I really hope that you guys do a little bit of that ear trainer. Well, I don't hope. I'm gonna torture you with the homework on this, so you have no option about this. So we will do it. Andrei and Dima. So we had a conversation yesterday. I'm kind of stopping the content of the lecture. We will talk more about this next week. I will also talk I will also talk about a couple of nuggets. There are new things that I learned about tape and saturation. It's also a bachelor's year 2 presentation, but I think it's a good one. Like it's a first time I did a pro presentation on distortion, saturation, and noise. BSc year 2 presentation, and there are some really cool thoughts here that I will share with you. So I do want to have one conversation about dynamics and saturation together. And from there, it will also lead towards the technical year trainer. So you are going to have a homework to do for me, which will be to do some time in the technical year trainer on dynamics and on distortion, because I want you to learn how to identify distortion better. And I'm not talking about distortion like the distortion that you put on a guitar. I'm talking about when the low end is too saturated and you cannot hear it well. So, end of the content of the presentation of the lecture today. Now. Back a little bit to the conversation, Dima, that we were having about yesterday. Andre, are you here with us?
Yeah.
Look, I just want to be very, very clear about some things. There are some times that I speak to all the class, and I'm kind of speaking more like to somebody in particular, but the whole class feels that I'm speaking to them.
Yeah, I understand it.
Yeah, give me a second. I'm going to stop the stream just to be more fair.